What is up, guys? So I've got a bit of a ban list discussion for you here today, just to kind of share my opinions on the ban list, what decks I think are going to be meta, and just kind of what I think the best strategy is going forward, depending on what kind of player you are. So to start off with a little bit of an update on what we had for the ban list. So our bans were Block Dragon, Jet Synchron, and Mecha Phantom Beast Lion. Call by the Grave went from 3 to 1. Double Iris Magician went to 1. Harpy's Feather Duster went to 1. Mercuria the Destructor was unlimited because it's going to be errated soon. Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche went to 1. Burning Abyss, Siren Graph went from 1 to 2. Totally Awesome and ABC Dragon Buster also went from 1 to 2. Tour Guide from the Underground went from 2 to 3. Evgiski Gus Kraken went from 2 to 3. Pantheism of the Monarchs went from 1 to 3. And Widow Anchor went from 2 to 3. So, yeah, this is it was quite an interesting ban list. It will have shaken up the meta. I would say that this ban list has kind of pushed us away from a kind of combo format into more of a control one. I would say we're still going to have one or two strong combo decks, but in general I'd say we're in a much more control oriented format. Eldritch completely escaped hits on the ban list, as did Dragon Link. Infernoble kind of escaped hits. Yeah, so there are a couple of combo decks, and Adamant Spade is still able to combo, they just don't recover as well as before. But yeah, in general, we're in more of a control format. So let's go through the different kind of decks and how they're going to be changing. So we start off with Adamant Spade. As I said, they've lost Block Dragon, so they don't have as much recovery. They've lost Mecha Phantom Beast O-Lion, that can be replaced by Mecha Phantom Beast Colt Wing for most of the combos, and they've lost Call by the Grave. So that's kind of a hit across the board to rogue decks, to combo decks, to everything. People are much more susceptible to hand traps. You do still have Triple Tactics talent, but it's not exactly the same. The thing about that card is that it only really works for certain types of decks, basically. Either if your deck is already a good deck that has loads of extenders, or your deck is the kind of deck that just sets 5 and passes, then that card is still good for you. But if you're the kind of deck that you're rogue deck, or you're reliant on one effect to go through, then it's not really gonna make much of a difference for your deck. So that card is kind of a replacement for Call by the Grave, but not entirely. But yeah, so Colt Wing replacing Mecha Phantom Beast O-Line. I mean, Adamant Spade, they're still gonna be making these massive synchro boards. It's just gonna be a case of these boards are gonna be breakable. When it breaks it, they're not just gonna get all 3 of their starters back to their hand and do the same thing as before. We might see more of a focus on like the Earth synchros, like Naturia Beast and stuff. That was the kind of builds that you were doing with Adamant Spade before. It might focus on those synchros more than the ones now. We also might see a kind of control variant of Adamant Spade. I've seen a couple of builds and they're not too bad. But in general, I think it will still be in the meta. I don't think it's the best combo deck anymore, and I don't think it's as strong as Eldritch anymore, but it's still better than most of the other decks in the format. They do still have 3 incredible starters in their deck, which I think, and a Monster Reborn, which I think makes them, even as like kind of like a minor engine, still amazing. The loss of Block Dragon is only is quite it's not minor, but it doesn't change their game plan in my opinion. Yeah, so Adamant Spade is still gonna be meta. I think. They're moving on Eldritch. So Eldritch now I think is probably one of the strongest decks in the format. So the Synchro variant have lost Jet Synchron and Mecha Phantom Beast O-Lion. But weirdly enough, it doesn't really matter for Eldritch, firstly, because there's so many variants, firstly. So the Invoked variant, the Pure variant, Dogmatic variant, Numeron variant, they don't care. And the Synchro variant can just use different cards to get into that same combo. Because of the way it plays as well, it's quite a grindy and slow deck and able to sort of hold back before doing that Synchro combo. Using cards like Plague Spreader, Zombie, and Colt Wing is just as feasible for them. So I would say the Synchro variant, even though it's lost Jet, I don't think it's completely dead. I think it's less good than before, but still a good variant. And I think not having Call by the Grave again, Eldritch doesn't, it helps Eldritch more than it hurts it in my opinion, because losing the Golden Lord to Call by the Grave before would have been quite big, but now most decks are only going to have access to one copy of that card. So yeah, the Pure Invoked Dogmatic variants, if anything, are stronger. Synchro variants a bit weaker. One great thing about Eldritch as well is that, so the card that I think actually is a good replacement for Call by the Grave is Gamma. But Gamma doesn't work for most decks, but for Eldritch I'd say it actually works quite well. There are quite a few effects that Gamma is likely to be live, because it's not hard to have no monsters inside of your field and still be doing plays with Eldritch. So I think they could use that card. They can also use Talents, because Talents is actually a good card for Eldritch as well. And also we're going to see a lot more Dragoon builds. I think Dragoon Eldritch is going to be a thing, because again it's a deck that can really easily incorporate an engine to bring out Vertain and bring out Dragoon. So yeah, definitely Eldritch is going to be meta. I think it's very possibly going to be the best deck of the format. Very strong deck. There's not really a control deck that can come close to it, in my opinion, at the moment. But then moving on, another deck that completely escaped hits on the ban list is Invoke Shadows. And as Invoke Shadows, I'm kind of counting this as kind of Invoke Shadows and also Invoke Eldritch, just Invoked in general. So Invoke Shadows is the main meta deck I'm talking about, but we're also kind of counting about other Invoked variants. And I'd say they didn't really see any losses. Again, Call by the Grave both helps them and hurts them. Getting a Call by an Alistair sucks, but at the same time, not having Call by from the top is a bit of an issue. We might start seeing Dragoon added into these builds as well because they can spam materials out quite well. Also Rainbow Neos, I mean, we did see that a bit before in the OCG, and we might see it here again, a bit of Rainbow Neos added as a counter, and just because it's a pretty good card anyway. But other than that, I don't think we'll see much change in their build. I think one good thing is it's a slower format, so Invoke Shadows will be better because it is a grindy deck. It hasn't got a massively high ceiling, but it does grind very, very well, so we will see that deck in the meta. And then I think the second contender for best deck in the format is going to be Dragon Link. So Dragon Link saw no hits whatsoever, which I was really, really shocked by, and that deck is really, really, truly amazing. I mean, you can't stop their combo. They're similar to Adamantipator from before, where they have so many extenders and starters that there's really not a lot you can do unless you have like 2 to 3 hand traps, and if you have that many hand traps, you're probably not going to be killing them in your turn because the deck's just so good at playing through interruption. So yeah, that deck is definitely really good. We're going to see Dragoon in that deck as well, definitely, because they can easily make it. And I would say that this is probably the best combo deck of the format. I don't think there's a combo deck that can do as well as it, because it doesn't really, even though it can use Hyperfire, it stands more on the LP Guard Dragon side, and those cards aren't really being noticed by Konami at the moment. So I would say that, yeah, definitely really, really good combo deck, really strong deck. Dragon Link is going to be a huge problem in the format. What I always find though is, for some reason, people don't play that deck as much. Maybe it's just me, but you occasionally see like a pro player or a couple of people playing it at top tables and they do really well, but the masses don't seem to play it, maybe because it's quite a skill intensive deck, so it pushes people away from it. I know for me that's why I don't play it, but yeah, really good deck. Then we have Infernoble Knights. So that's in my opinion, the kind of second/third deck combo deck of the format. It's still really good. They didn't have Smoke Grenade hit, which was nice, but the deck still has the same issues as before in that their normal summon is a big part of their combo. If you stop their normal summon, their Isolde, a lot of the times they can't extend through that, which gives them a big amount of weaknesses. But we're not going to see much change in their combos. They're a contender for the best combo deck, I guess, but I don't think they're as good as Dragon Link, in my opinion. I just don't think they are. But I do think they are meta. They're still going to be a good meta deck in the format. Then moving on, we have Burning Abyss. So Burning Abyss saw huge buffs. They had Tour Guide go to 3, Graph and Seer go to 2, and Rusty Bardiche allowed. So in the TCG right now, we don't have the new Phantom Knight cards, so they haven't seen as big of a buff as they could have. But pure variants of it, even now the Phantom Knight variants you can do now, they're just so much stronger. The Fiend Control version of Burning Abyss, we might not see it as much because PK Fire is just superior to that. But in general, Burning Abyss is a lot stronger. I think they're not going to be a high tier meta deck, but they will be in the format, definitely. We will have a couple of players because they are a good deck, and I think they have a unique ability to grind for the kind of deck that they are. They can really kind of disrupt your opponent in a bit of a weird way and just keep floating. The Seer Graph loop, Dante loop is just so strong. Graph's ability to shoot cards from the deck is amazing, and the deck is very consistent. It can extend usually from almost any hand because all the Burning Abyss cards pretty much do the same thing when in the hand, which is really good. So I would say as a control deck, it's not bad. It's not as good as Eldritch, and that's how it tends to be. If you're not the best of your certain category in a format, a lot of times you just get overshadowed by another deck, which would be Eldritch in this situation. But I do still think BA will be a good deck. When the Phantom Knight support comes out though, very possibly we'll see that in the format because they can do some degenerate things like bringing out Kali Yuga and stuff on the opponent's turn, which is always going to be awesome. Then moving on, we have Orcust. So Orcust is similar to before. They have the same issues before. Phantom Knights coming back into the format doesn't make Orcust better in terms of consistency or anything, but it does make their power ceiling a lot higher. Having kind of Galatea underneath a Bardiche with a Crescendo and some Fog Blades and then a Dinghy that can come back. I mean, that's an insane board that Orcust can bring out, in not too difficult a fashion. But they do still have the same issues that they have. Not having a heart, but does hurt them a lot. Does kind of lose their consistency. So I'd say that Orcust, they're unlikely to be meta, but they are a good choice if you want to kind of play like a rogue option. And they're not a bad deck by any stretch of imagination. They have seen a bit of a jump in power. Yeah, but moving on, we have Dinos. So Dinos, I don't consider Dino a meta deck. I've never really, even though they do top, I consider them more of an anti-meta deck because they're just never the best at what they do, but they're a good kind of meta call, and they have a strength in that they have one of the strongest main deck boss monsters there are, which allows them to have good answers to a lot of the format. I mean, Tyranno, for example, can out Dragoon pretty easily just by virtue of the fact that Miscellaneousaurus can make him immune to Dragoon's effect, and then they can just flip him, not meaning that they can just beat up the Dragoon really, really easily. So Tyranno is a really, really good boss monster, and the deck has so many starters now that is really, really powerful. The combo variant I don't think is worth playing. It can bring out calamities, which is well and good, but to be honest, I'd rather just play Numeron Eldritch or something if that's my strategy. But I do think the kind of go second variant that we saw Team Samurai top with, I think that's a really good option for kind of dealing with the meta. And if you want to kind of have a kind of going second build to just kind of kill people as quickly as possible, and then from there just kind of steamroll people who aren't expecting that, I do think Dinos is a good option. I also think it's a nice budget option in a way. It's probably the most budget meta deck in my opinion, just because there's no real cards in it that are hugely expensive in the main deck at least. It's only when you come to extra deck Dinos and then it starts getting a bit ridiculous in terms of price. But yeah, Dino, really, really good deck though. Still a good deck to play. Then we have ABC. So ABC and Paleozoic is kind of counted, and everything I say about ABC will probably apply to Paleozoic at least on some level. But yeah, it's really nice that having their boss monster back to 2 is nice. I don't think it should have been hit in the first place. I think it should be at 3. But having 2 means the deck can be played, and I've done a lot of testing with ABCs recently because I did do a guide on that deck quite recently, and the deck is really, really, really good. They can really grind up there with the best of them. One of the things that really helped the deck as well is getting unauthorized reactivation and Union Driver in, I don't know if it was Attorney Code or Rise of the Duelist, but those 2 cards have given a huge amount of speed and consistency to the strategy, and I do think that's going to be huge for the deck, allowing it to kind of compete as it's taken a similar place to Salamangre as this kind of mid-range combo / control deck that kind of doesn't ever put out these massively impressive boards, but can just grind out your opponent and then kill them from nowhere with Boral Sword or whatever. I mean, the interactions between Seacrust Wyvern, just continually special summoning things from your hand and then using that with Nightmares to clear your opponents or just to link up, is actually really, really powerful. Not because the deck doesn't really have hard once per turns on any of its main deck Burn Abyss monsters, which is, well, not Burn Abyss, sorry, main deck ABC monsters, which is really, really, really strong. But yeah, so ABC Dragon Buster, definitely a really, really good deck. I'm not gonna be meta in my opinion. Probably going to be a rogue again, similar to Dino, rogue / anti-meta deck, but still going to be very, very good. That also applies to Salamangre, by the way. Everything I've just said about ABC. The problem with these decks is their ceiling isn't high enough to compete, and it's always, again, they're not as good as controlling as Eldritch, so unfortunately they won't be in the meta, but they will still be good options to play against the meta with. Then moving on, we have Pendulum. So Pendulum, that deck, it's really sad. That's probably like my next meta deck after Invoke Shadows. Invoke Shadows is what I usually play when I'm playing a meta deck, but Pendulum is the other deck that I was playing for a long time, and it's a shame. Having Double Iris is lovely, and having Revolution Dragon come out recently is also nice, but the deck just doesn't have really good options of kind of playing through disruption anymore. Before, you had the advantage of Electromite, meaning that you're going to at least be getting really consistent searches and stuff, so even if someone interrupts you, it doesn't matter because you've got so many searches and pops and all of that. But now, without having Electromite, without having enough servants so that you can consistently get a Jackal and negate a disruption, Pendulum is in a really, really bad spot, and I don't think 1 Double Iris is enough to push it into the meta. We might see a bit of a control kind of Pendulum Graph build with like Odd Eyes and all of this, but I don't think we're going to see it be a meta build, a deck. I think Zark builds aren't really relevant for the most part. It's a fun thing to do, but it's not really a relevant build. And so, yeah, Pendulums is going to stay where they are, somewhere down the depths of non-meta completely, which is unfortunate for the deck. But then moving on, lastly, we have Sky Striker. So Sky Striker, again, similarly, they haven't changed much, but I'd say one advantage of Sky Striker compared to the other decks on this list is that Sky Striker really is consistent and good at doing what it does, playing under Mystic Mine, and that card is always going to be amazing. Mystic Mine wasn't touched, so while Sky Striker themselves haven't been buffed, the game state we're in, the format we're in, and the cards that it has available to it already in the meta that aren't part of the archetype, allow Mystic Mine, allow it to be played, and I think we are going to see some Sky Striker tops as usual. The one good thing about that deck as well is it's a really, really skill intensive deck. Even though it's quite simple at face value, it's quite a skillful deck. You do see the pilots of Sky Strikers doing some crazy things and topping in formats where they really have no right to, but they somehow managed to pull it off. So I do think the 3 anchor is nice. It doesn't really make a huge difference, but Sky Striker is going to be just about Rogue. I think just about Rogue is where we will see Sky Striker stay for a while. Maybe if they get something like 1 engage back. The problem with Sky Striker obviously is that as soon as they get engage back, you're going to have other decks splashing that card in because that card is completely busted. But yeah, maybe if they get like an engage or something back, that might help them out a bit more, because right now just the lack of an ability to consistently search a card in their deck means that going first or going second, they just don't have good strategy and good choices in terms of what to do. Yeah. Oh, actually, there's one more deck that I have forgotten. That's Subterra. So Subterra is always there lurking at the bottom as the annoying control deck in every format. So Subterra actually also do think will be meta. I think Subterra Dragoon is probably one of the best variants just because of the interaction between set cards and Red Eyes Fusion. So if you don't know, you can actually set cards when you activate Red Eyes Fusion. You can't normal summon or special summon, but you can set cards and then flip them. So Subterrors can activate Red Eyes Fusion, set their Guru, activate their field spell, flip the Guru, and that does not count as a normal summon or special summon, meaning they can basically get the 2 cards, ignore the whole restriction of Red Eyes Fusion. And so I think Red Eyes Subterra is going to be, all Numeron Subterra is going to be very, very good as a control deck. Not as good as Eldritch, still not as good as Eldritch. You're going to hear me say that 50 times, obviously. But it is going to be a really good build, and I do think Subterrors are going to have a chance to kind of sneak some tops here and there. So, to summarize, so yeah, our meta is going to be kind of our Dogmatica variants, which is like Eldritch and Sodol. By the way, the reason why I didn't cover Dogmatica is right now it's not really a deck. You don't really see people playing pure Dogmatica, you see them playing Dogmatica variants. But yeah, our Dogmatica variants like Eldritch Dogmatica, Sodol Dogmatica, they are going to be top tier in the meta. They're going to probably be the best decks. Then we, and also have things like your Invoked and your Pure and your Numeron Eldritch. Then we're going to have below that all on the same. We'll see how it goes. Dragon Link is probably the only deck that really comes close to Eldritch, if not beating it. Below that we would have kind of our Infernobles, our Adamanticators, our Invoked, and then below that is everything else. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting meta. One last thing, it's really, really sad. Unfortunately, we do not have S0 and True King of all Calamities. Neither of those were, or we hadn't had them hit in our format. Now that is really frustrating, but the change from before is that we have Forbidden Droplets, we have Infinite Impermanence, and people know how to play against these cards a lot better. So while they are still really kind of negative cards to play against and just not conducive to a positive game environment, I would say that them not being banned is not as big of an issue as I would have thought initially, just because if you have the counters in your deck, or if you're playing Meta, at least you're playing at the top tables, you're going to have your Forbidden Droplets in your deck, you're going to have triple Tactical Talents, you're going to have Imperms in your main deck, and so those cards aren't going to be as instant win as they were before. And the combos to bring them out, I mean, Numeron, it's you can bring out Zexal, but then it's just as easy as set pass to get around that, unless your deck can really consistently OTK after that. And then True King of all Calamities, if you can activate spells, then it's not going to matter as much as you would think. So I definitely think those two decks, those 2 cards, as frustrating as they are, they're not as big of a kind of sign of doom for the format as some people might think. But yeah, in general, I'm happy about the ban list. I'd say I'm quite happy with how the ban list has gone. I think it could have gone better. Like I said, I think those 2 cards could be banned. I think Gus Kraken shouldn't have come back to 3, but I prefer it. Adamanticator was a really unfair deck in some way, and just the ability to keep spamming Block Dragon, it needed to be dealt with. So I'm quite happy that Konami did finally deal with that. Here's to hoping that we don't have the same issue with Dragon Link now. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But guys, that is my ban list discussion and my opinions on it. Thank you all for watching, and I will talk to you all soon.